chainers, wherever you are in the world. This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I am the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended podcast, and the founder of the Blended Pledge. And I'm excited to be here with you today. We've got Josh from Reveal joining me as our guest, and we're going to be talking all about the GRI rate increase with UPS and FedEx and everything that you need to know to get through it for 2024. But before we do that, let's hear from our show sponsor. So are you ready to find your tribe? If you're struggling to find a supply chain community of like-minded professionals where you can level up, network, learn about best practices from experts in supply chain, professional development, and marketing, look no further. We created the Secret Society of Supply Chain to provide a safe space, a community for everyone in supply chain. We offer unique opportunities for everyone to connect and grow in our three distinct value-packed communities: the supply chainers, women in supply chain, and the creative room. From the learn at your own pace, content-rich approach of the supply chainers to the empowering community-focused space of women in supply chain and the marketing mastermind of the creative room. We mean it when we say there's truly a place for everyone. Head over to let's talksupplychain.com, secretsocietyofsupplychain.com to explore which community was made for you. All right, let's talk about our brand new episode. So this was another episode that I got the chance to film in person in Atlanta. And if you saw any of the videos around that studio, loved that studio space, definitely want to go back and do more. This episode is with Jeff from Gaines, and we're talking about decision intelligence around supply chain design. And he talks about what that actually means, how they've coined the term, and how that's going to help you to navigate the future of supply chain and also the present of supply chain as well. And so go and check it out. It's episode 385, wherever you listen to the podcast, and let us know what you think. I want to know who's in the audience as well. So if you're out there, let us know where you are watching and listening from. All right. What do we have next? So on Friday, Eric Johnson is going live with Log Tech Live, another episode, and he's talking about a new risk emerges in supply chain. Most supply chain professionals are like, really? Do we need another disruption with what is happening right now? But if you want to know what that new risk is, go ahead and click the attend button. And even if you can't attend live, I will send you the recording so that you can stay up to date in your supply chains. And on Wednesday, I am going to be doing a webinar. I'm moderating and hosting a webinar with BlackBerry Radar, as well as Matthew Leffler. And we're going to be talking about transportation asset management. We're going to be going beyond the GPS. We're also going to be talking about how you can get a fast ROI through our asset management as well. What else have we got going on? Oh, Blended Pledge. So we want to encourage, we know that it's event season right now. Now, the Blended Pledge gives away grants to cover travel expenses so that diverse voices can say yes to speaking engagements. So if you have a speaking opportunity, make sure to go to blendedpledge.org and apply for one of our grants today. And we can help you with all of those travel expenses so that you can go and say yes to those speaking engagements. So head over there. We want to be able to support you. We want to be 2024 to be the year of diverse voices on industry stages. So head over there. All right. It is now time to bring up our guest for today. Josh, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Doing great. It's good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a little early where you are. You're joining us from California, so thanks so much for getting up.
Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it.
All right. Well, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Josh Dunham. I'm CEO and co-founder of Reveal. And Reveal is really a technology organization that helps drive transparency into the parcel shipping space. So think FedEx, UPS, and some of the other regional carriers.
Well, and we're going to be talking all about that today. I mean, it's affecting everybody across the board, the GRI rate increase, what UPS and FedEx are doing for 2024. And we're going to be talking about that because it's super, super important, because if they're not careful, there's so many hidden fees, and it's actually not 5.9%, but we're going to get into that a little bit more just in a few minutes. So let's talk about the poll of the week. So the question that we asked everybody, and we do ask a question every single Wednesday morning. So make sure to head over to the Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn and Instagram to be part of the conversation. Now, we asked, have you ever hired an outside consultant to optimize your shipping operations? 67% of you said no, and 30% of you said yes. 4% of you said other, which I'll get into in just a minute. Josh, what do you think about these results? I thought most people actually worked with outside consultants. So I'm actually really surprised that only 30% said yes.
Yeah, not very surprised.
Okay.
And the reason being, we've done a lot of research actually on this, and typically, what we found in our research for reasons to not use a consultant is, number one, it's expensive.
Okay. Fair.
Hiring outside people and bringing them in is expensive. And along the same lines as the expense, one of the typical pricing models for consultants in the space is to take a gain share for multiple years. And what we've heard in a lot of our research and interviews is that customers, quite honestly, don't want to pay a ton of money for work that's done on day one and then have to pay for like 2-3 years. They just don't think that's fair. And then the next thing that consultants, with that pricing model are up against is, well, if I could just do half as good as you, or if I could just do, 2/3 as good as a consultant can do, I can kind of break even on cost. So those are some of the things that we hear. But we're also seeing a lot of interesting things from the technology perspective, where we're seeing customers are interested in buying technology as opposed to bringing in consultants.
Right. Well, and actually, this takes us back to our conversation, because we had a conversation on stage at Home Delivery World, right, about how consultancy or parcel consultants are dead. So talk to us a little bit about the opposite solution. And Bayram actually asks, what are the skills needed to be a good consultant? So kind of mesh those two together, because really, at the end of the day, it's not quite dead. There's solutions to it, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that go into, parcel consulting and then just kind of running your own RFPs. And I would say number one is you've got to know your data. So know your shipping profile. Arguably one of the most important and highest leverage points that shippers have is your knowledge of the impact of things that the carriers are doing. And that's actually a really good conversation today around GRI, is just knowing the impact of GRI for you specifically. But another thing is we always advise companies, focus on where you spend the money. Know your profile enough to know where the dollars are being spent, so that you can focus in those very, very specific areas. Don't get distracted in other areas where you don't ship.
Right.
Just focus on where you spend the money. And then I would say last, but certainly not least, is it helps if you can ask for very, very specific things. So ask for specific areas, or for specific things in very specific areas, and be very specific with your ask. Because ultimately what your carrier rep needs to do is take what you're asking, build a case, and go to the pricing analyst that is going to be basically creating pricing for your account. So be very specific in the asks.
So I think also what you're saying is that having the right technology is really going to help you navigate these conversations, especially as we talk through some of the things that we need to think about. They're going to support that conversation rather than maybe even going to an outside consultant.
Absolutely. And that was really kind of the crux around our last conversation, was that, is parcel consulting dead? For some it is, but it's not necessarily dead. It's what it is it's changing. But what shippers are finding is that, yes, they can leverage technology and they can leverage tools, as opposed to bringing in high priced consultants, and still get very, very similar results.
Well, especially if it's that long-term, like 2 to 3 years you were talking about, because that's a long time to be in a contract with somebody, especially right now when people are sort of thinking quarter to quarter at the moment. right? So I want to say hi to Frank and Peter over on my personal LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we get into our first article, can you give us a bit of a market update? What's happening in your world? I mean, obviously the GRI, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, but what are some of the things that are top of mind? What are some of the things that your customers are thinking about for 2024 outside of that?
Yeah. So number one is cutting costs, right? Is we're coming into a new year. GRI just got announced, and
How do we
along the
do
lines of
that?
cutting, yeah. So along the lines of cutting costs, though, is in interviewing some of our larger retailers, they had cut a lot of their forecasts going into peak. And surprisingly, many of them actually had a really, really good peak season. So volumes were actually above anticipated.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, over the peak season, holiday season. And they have, however, kept their cut forecast for Q1 and Q2 coming into
Okay.
2024. So that is definitely an expectation that they are having. One of the other things that we're seeing is that it's actually because of some of the more recent over the past year drops in volume. The carriers are very, very willing to negotiate. So that's something to keep in mind. Now is a very, very good time to approach a carrier. And I would say the other thing that we're seeing is the role of technology in our space.
Mm,
So not only from FedEx and UPS, but from technology providers like us. But we're seeing a lot. We're kind of seeing this mental shift to where it's the thought on the shipper side is, well, empower me with technology so that I can then do this myself.
yeah, I'm glad that you said that because I think there's a lot of overwhelm out there as far as technology. There's a lot of options,
Mhm.
right? There's technology out there that is good for one organization but not necessarily good for another. And so having to navigate that conversation and trying to figure out who is the right fit for us, making that case, trying to get the budget, like there's so many different things involved in bringing on a new technology and figuring out which one is the right one for them. I think that you're using the right words as far as empower, right? Build me the case. What are you going to do for me as a technology provider? What is it going to do to my day-to-day operations and for my supply chain teams? And how are you going to empower me to have the right conversation so I can get that budget and we can implement that technology?
Yep.
So, yes, lots lots of things to talk about, especially around technology, and we're still talking about it. I mean, there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of things that people also have a focus, right, for the
Yep.
year. What technology are we going to implement for 2024? Because at the end of the day, we have to be realistic as to what projects we can take on, right? Especially with onboarding and implementation. And just so everybody knows, we did do a podcast episode. And so go and check that podcast episode out because then you can learn a little bit more about what Reveal does. All right, let's talk about the first article that we're gonna get into around the general rate increase. So from what we're hearing, right, in December and January 1st, UPS and FedEx did a 5.9% GRI increase across the board. But from reading this particular article, there's a few things that stood out for me. One is rate cards. So apparently, on top of this, there's rate cards, which are GRI plus surcharges plus rules plus fees. So really, the 5.9% that has been published is really not 5.9%. There's also hidden fees within contracts and things like that. And this article, which you wrote, compares 2021 and 2022. So they came out with a general rate increase in 2021 of 5.9%. But what it actually meant at the end of the day was 12.8% by FedEx and 10.2% by UPS. Like, this is mind blowing. How do we get away with this in 2024? Talk to us about this, Josh.
Well, unfortunately, we don't really get away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we are all living in a shipper's world, and there's not a ton of options. Unfortunately, when it comes to parcel shipping, you have FedEx, you have UPS, and they command just such large market share. Now, you do have some emerging carriers, and you do have regional carriers, and I'm sure many have followed kind of that on track expansion, throughout the U.S. But there's really not a lot of carrier or a lot of options for shippers.
Mm-hmm.
But you're exactly right. The carriers announced a 5.9% increase even this year in 2024. And once again, that doesn't mean that it's 5.9%. And for anyone that follows FedEx and UPS or has followed them for quite some time, it's really no surprise that they announced the exact same rate increase. It's very, very typical. And a couple of the things that you do have to keep in mind, and you did mention this, Sarah, is that it's really important to not only understand, well, what's the average increase? Because one thing that's important to note with this announced increase of 5.9% is that the carriers take an average of just the service levels when they make their announcement. So it's just, okay, what is just the service? So when I say service, I mean, what's just the ground service level increase? What's the next day air service level increase? And what's important to note is they don't include fuel surcharge, or they don't include, surcharges or increases to surcharges. They don't include, if they make a rule change, like to the fuel surcharge, something that happened fairly recently. They don't include that in any of the numbers.
So you need to be very diligent when they come out. And of course, they're going to come out with that sort of 5.9% each. But as you can see, and as you dive into this particular article a little bit more, it showcases how those hidden fees, surcharges, rules, and additional fees really do add up, and what the difference could be. Because in 2021, like I said, FedEx was 12.8, UPS was 10.2, but in 2022, FedEx was 9.1 and UPS was 10.2. So, you have to really take into consideration, because that 1% means a really big difference to a lot of shippers and organizations, especially when we're thinking about small to medium or even enterprise level who are shipping out, just millions of dollars on an annual basis.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really important when you're doing kind of the analysis on your own is not to just take 5.9% and have mentally in your mind that that's going to be your increase. Because really what you need to do is, I know you mentioned rate cards and you mentioned kind of all of these things.
Yeah.
Really what you need to do to get an accurate number for your individual profile is actually run what the new rates do for your profile. So your shipping. What service mix do you have? Do you have a bunch of ground shipments? Is it mostly express? There's going to be different increases for every company out there, and it's going to be it's going to be really customized for the individual shipper.
Well, and it sounds like every parts of your profile as well, whether you're doing an express route, whether you're doing a standard route, depending on where you're shipping to and from. But the other part of that is you don't want to get your invoice thinking that it's 5.9%. All of a sudden it's 12.8%, blood pressure skyrockets. We do not need that for supply chain professionals anymore. So you really need to understand your shipping rates and what this GRI means to you. Now, if anybody has any questions about this, make sure to put them in the comments, because this is your time to ask that question, because we've got Josh on the show. Jim says last mile carriers are a partial solution ? What do you think about that?
Yeah, there has been an emergence of not only last mile. Last mile has been around for quite some time, but also middle mile. So we see, a lot of that, and a lot of shippers are looking at that. One of the things that's very, very interesting in the course of this year is what we've seen, and this is something to really keep in mind and look at as you begin thinking about shifting volume, is we've seen the carriers start getting more and more aggressive, with their pricing. And as a byproduct of that, they're commanding more volume and getting more volume. The other thing that we're seeing is as shippers' volume has come down, many of our large retailers are actually, as a byproduct of that, having to shift volume from a last mile carrier or a middle mile carrier or even a regional carrier back to FedEx and UPS in order to hit their earned discount thresholds, and also in order to hit their bonuses. So if they have a quarterly or even an annual bonus, the volume thresholds have dropped, so they actually need to pull volume in. So we're seeing that a lot as well. But one of the big like middle mile carriers that we've worked a lot with in the past is a company called Mergo, and they help with some zone skipping. So that is a very, very popular option that shippers are looking at. And then, of course, some of the final mile is absolutely a viable option. You just got to really pay attention to your volume thresholds with FedEx and UPS.
Yeah, those discounts at that volume threshold, it kind of makes me think about what we do with airlines as passengers, right? We want to make sure that we hit those super elite and those elite thresholds so that we get those bonuses and those perks and different things like that. So they kind of get you, right? They kind of get you. All right. Let's get to our second article. So now this is another part of obviously that GRI, that rate increase in 2024 that FedEx and UPS has come out with. But this is talking about unveiling the true impact. Now, let's talk about what that true impact actually means for you in 2024. I mentioned 2021, 2022, 2024. You guys did some analysis, and it looks like 8.17% for FedEx and 7.72% for UPS. Now, those are actually quite a bit lower than what we saw in 2021, 2022. So talk to us about the true impact of this rate increase. And then to also talk to us about the importance of negotiation. I mean, you touched on it a little bit in that last article, but I think that this really, like negotiation really is, you know, somewhere where it can make the most difference, especially in 2024.
Yeah. So a couple things with the number on how we came to that number. So one of the things that we do is we run an individual GRI analysis for each of our customers. And really what it does is it takes every single shipment that they shipped over the course of 2023, and it models every single shipment to the package level with the new rates for 2024. So new surcharges, new service level rates, new fuel, et cetera. And what we do then is we aggregate kind of the findings there, and then we come up with these numbers. So like you said, Sarah, you know, FedEx is 8.17%, UPS 7.72%. That's in aggregations. That's more of a macro level kind of number, but it does differ, obviously, per customer based on their shipping profile. We're seeing many customers are getting about an 11% increase. And then a couple of big call outs in regard to specific findings is we're seeing that heavier shipments are going to be more highly impacted. So if you have a shipping profile to where you're shipping, you know, ground or next day air, and it's heavier weight, you're going to get a larger increase. And then if you're also, if you have a product that has an additional handling or an oversized fee subject to it, you're going to get a significant increase on those as well. So we're seeing the additional handling is anywhere from like a 13% to a 19% increase based on the additional handling charge. And then oversized is actually a 19 to 21% increase.
Wow.
So very significant increase in those areas. And then once again, kind of along the lines of a macro level analysis is we kind of took it a step further and we said, okay, well, you know, not only what profiles are hit harder, but who, like what industries.
Yeah.
So we ran the analysis through through our SIC codes, and we saw that furniture and home furnishings were hit very, very hard. Auto parts were hit very, very hard, as well as sporting goods. So those are kind of the top three hit industries or SIC codes that we saw.
Well, and just so everybody knows, because I can just picture everybody in the audience sort of furiously trying to take notes, there is a rate guide that we've just put in the comments for you on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I'll be putting it on my personal LinkedIn after the show that you can go and get all of this information. So go and get that rate guide. It's actually going to help you navigate some of this. And also, I think, talk about the negotiation techniques and what you should be talking about when you do negotiate with the carriers. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So one important thing to think about when you're negotiating is a lot of times people view a negotiation as just this ginormous event that needs to take place. And it's, oh my gosh, it's going to take 3 months. And, you know, this back and forth that is going to happen with my carriers. The other thing we hear is, well, I just signed a 3-year or I signed a 5-year agreement, you know, with my carrier. What can I really do? Aren't my hands tied? And the answer to that is, well, no, not really. And there's a magic word that we like to use, and that magic word is called addendum. So rather than think about, that's
not the magic word I thought you were going to come out with, but anyways, here we are.
So rather than think about, you know, these giant events, is there are small tweaks that you can make to your contracts, and the carriers are really, really receptive. You know, at the end of the day, the carriers, they really do have, you know, a vested interest to partner, you know, with their customers. I mean, they want retention, you know, just like anyone else, right? And they do at the end of the day want to help. And carrier reps, you know, are typically really, really good, you know, with their customers. So what an addendum is essentially you have your main agreement, and you can still keep that as the base. But if you realize that, oh my gosh, we do a lot of additional handling, we do a lot of oversize, focus on those two specific areas and work with your carrier rep on it. And rather than overhaul the entire agreement, do a quick addendum and say, hey, we need to really sharpen the pencil in these specific areas.
Right.
So that would be a goal, I would say, for those that are looking to make small improvements.
Well, it makes it easier for everybody. We don't have to redo the whole contract and go to legal here and go to legal there and bring everybody together. It's just one paragraph, maybe two paragraphs, depending on what we're focusing on. I love that magic word. Thank you so much for sharing that. One other point that you do talk about in the rate guide, I believe, is around data science and how important that is. I mean, that's just going back to what you were talking about as far as technology. One quick question I have for you before we go on to the next one. Can we use AI to help extract some of the fine points? I'm just asking because I know AI is a big thing right now.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. And it's been a big thing for us too over the last handful of years. It's something that we've really tried to leverage in our business. But one thing that we have found is that machines are really, really good at taking very large data sets and finding patterns in the data sets. And that's essentially, if you think about our model, or at least what we've transitioned to, is we take large data sets. We run machine learning algorithms over this data set and use things like AI to produce insights for our customers. So what can I now tangibly do as a shipper, given the data? So that's essentially what we do, is provide insights over the data set.
Yeah, so they're going to get that anyways by working with you at Reveal. So I love that. All right. So last but not least, we've only got a couple of minutes to talk about this, but Forbes came out with an article based around 15 customer experience predictions for 2024. The reason why I wanted to bring this up is because they had 140 people actually submit 1 to 3 predictions each for 2024. And so they actually had to sort through 263 predictions to come up with this article. Now, I think there's 10 in total. It's very comprehensive. There's a lot of really great feedback from people within the industry who have provided some of these predictions. One of the things that I wanted to point out about this that really ties into the conversation that we've had today is that customer experience is more important. And when you're looking at working with a carrier, mid-mile, last mile, UPS, FedEx, they are an extension of your business. They are delivering your customer experience to your customer. And if customer experience is going to be at the forefront, and also sustainability, right? They're your sustainability partner in getting customers to come back to you as well. And those are the first two things on this list that are the most important for 2024. And so choosing the right carrier, the right partner to really deliver that customer experience for you is going to be paramount. Josh, what did you think about this article?
I think they're right on. There is a shift to focusing on customer experience. Really at the end of the day, if you're a shipper and your product doesn't get to your customer on time, they don't blame FedEx or UPS. They blame you.
Yeah.
Or any carrier for that matter. So yeah, I mean, customer experience really is extremely important as you think about your network, right? As a shipper, you think about what carriers you're going to include in your network strategy. And things like on-time percentage, things like time in transit, those are absolutely things you should be tracking. And be aware of.
And they're also talking points. Like we go back to what you said about negotiation. As long as you have that data and that information, you can go back and have that conversation with them and say, hey, your on-time delivery percentage was this. We need it to be here. What are you going to do for me in 2024 to make that happen? Right. And that could be, part of your negotiations around rates as well. Just throwing it out there. Some of the other predictions that they talked about was physical stores making a comeback, employee experience over generative AI, but then they also said, but also generative AI. So there's two sides of the coin with that one. Marketing is going to be more effective and productive, security issues, on-site search, and focus on competencies. So I highly recommend you go and check out that article as well as the Reveal article, and go and sign up for the guide as well. That's going to help you in 2024. Now, before we go, I do want to let you guys know, I did I know this is paused, but I did an event post about where we're going to be over the upcoming weeks. And so This week, we've got the BlackBerry Radar webinar at 2 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, LogTech Live on Friday. We've also got Manifest that's happening February 5th through 7th. I will be there. I'm going to be filming for Manifest Insights, filming for Let's Talk Supply Chain, lots of stuff going on. And then TPM, I'm going to be back hosting TPM TV in March. And so that's March 4th through 6th, I believe, in Long Beach. And so hopefully I'll see you there. If you are there, make sure to come and say hi. Josh, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. This was so insightful, and I can't wait to share all of these insights and have everybody sign up for that guide as well. So thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. It's great to see you, and thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great week, everyone.